Okay, I think we are live.
Yes, we are live.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
I'm Charlie Carlson. I'm the chairman of the Nauset Estuary Stakeholder Group, and it's 5:06 p.m. and I'm calling this meeting to order. I need to start, as I always do, with figuring out who's going to take notes of tonight's meeting so that I can work with them to develop minutes of the meeting. And I am once again looking for a volunteer from the group of you.
You're going alphabetically.
Yeah, where are we at right now alphabetically?
I don't know. I guess, let's see, Jackie said that she was, she had passed before, but she may be passing permanently. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think she's passing permanently. So it was myself. I did 2 sets of minutes, and Kevin Galligan volunteered to do 1 set. So I think you're on G.
I think that
Thank
was,
you, Shayna.
I think Mr. Granlund, you are hereby nominated.
Uh-oh. I'm just taking notes and you're going to help me with this because I can't record it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Charlie, can I suggest, to avoid this whole note-taking debacle, that the town of Eastham provide an administrative assistant that could do the minutes for this group for as long as you guys want to meet, and that could be our contribution?
We would be thrilled, and I'd be happy to work with that person to
Okay,
edit
I
the
will
minutes.
try and find that person before the next meeting. How's that?
That would be wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Doesn't get me off the hook this time, though.
I'm sorry, John, it doesn't, but I figured Orleans is setting up the meeting, so we might as well do the note-taking.
I'll do the best I can. That's all I can promise. My note-taking skills are not good.
That's okay. Okay, so with that out of the way, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the August 6th and September 1st stakeholder meetings, and I'll take those in order. I'll welcome a motion on the August 6th minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Thank you. Thank you all. And with respect to the September 1st minutes, I welcome a motion there as well.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item is an update on the discussion that Leslie Field and I had with folks from the Seashore and the MIPA, that's with an M as in Michael, office, and the Cape Cod Commission on the use or non-use of a so-called special review procedure. Leslie, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, so as Charlie mentioned, we had a remote meeting with MIPA, 2 representatives from MIPA, 2 representatives from the Seashore, 1 representative from the Cape Cod Commission, and then it was myself and Beth from Woods Hole Group and Charlie. So we had that meeting a week ago, Monday. And it was to discuss our request for that special review procedure that we submitted probably over a month ago now. Just as a reminder, that request to MIPA was basically a request to MIPA to ask that they alter their statutory requirements for environmental review, meaning they extend their review periods, they extend the comment periods, they agree to accept one document that would satisfy both MIPA and NEPA and the Cape Cod Commission. So that was the intent of the request. You know, we weren't asking anything of the Seashore necessarily or of the Cape Cod Commission. It was just, you know, of MIPA. And we laid out a timeline in that special review of SRP request that sort of took the project through the various stages, starting with the submittal of the SRP request and going all the way through until we get the issuance of a certificate from the Secretary of Environmental Affairs on the environmental impact report. So we had milestones for all the steps in between those two points. So when we had that September 1 meeting with the agencies, I think you all heard that MIPA was questioning the need for the special review procedure. They said it was for bigger, more complicated projects, and they thought that we could, which was hard for us to believe that there could be one bigger and more complicated, but they thought that we could achieve the same results without the special review procedure. So that was the purpose of the meeting, was just to talk that through. And I think they also wanted to learn more from the Seashore as to what that NEPA review process would look like. And we got a little bit of information from them, but not significantly more than we already knew. So basically, I think they're recommending that we don't proceed with a special review procedure. We can, as they said, achieve the same results for a coordinated review without that formal procedure. So for example, if we decide that we're going to proceed with the joint review, but if we need MIPA to extend their public comment period, we can ask them as we submit a document, in the cover letter, we'll say, please extend your comment period, you know, for another 6 weeks to align with the comment period for the NEPA process. So we can basically achieve the same result without this formal special review procedure. Charlie and I talked about it afterwards, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but we decided together that we would go ahead and take MIPA's recommendation to withdraw that request for a special review procedure. And so we have done that.
That's correct.
Okay. A few other things that we learned during that meeting. We did get confirmation that after we file the expanded environmental notification form to MIPA, we will, at the end of that, we will hear from the Seashore whether or not we need to file an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. So we'll get that determination at that point. So the Seashore will have all the information that they need within that expanded environmental notification form in order to make that decision. Everyone agreed that we still needed to keep inviting the Seashore and the Cape Cod Commission to these meetings. And so I think moving forward, we need to include them on the distribution and invite list so that they can be a part of these discussions and they can follow along as the project proceeds and develops.
Leslie, do you think it was limited to the commission, or you mean?
No, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we can continue to invite the other regulatory agencies too. Because this is the one thing, maybe that's the one downside to not doing this special review procedure, is that we have less leverage over those agencies to get them to attend these meetings. With that SRP process, they would have been requested from MIPA to attend the meetings, and now it's just this group requesting. But I think some of them will, and we can continue to invite them. One thing we did hear from the Seashore that was a new piece of information is that it has to do with the dispute over ownership of the spit. And what they were saying was that in the end, they have to, in addition to issuing a record of decision for the EA or the EIS, they also have to issue a special use permit if the project is on their land. But if there's a piece of land that we're using that's in dispute, they weren't quite sure as to ownership. They weren't quite sure how they could issue that special use permit. So it was sort of a curveball. I think we all knew that land dispute has been ongoing, but it has not been resolved yet. So what we agreed upon was that the Seashore was going to send us a map that shows us what they think they own. And then we're going to determine if any of the project, meaning mainly the pipeline, rests on any of that land. And then if it does, I think we're going to have to have some discussions about how this could be resolved.
So this is ownership of the spit between the seashore and the towns, or between the towns?
I'm not that up to speed on it. I know it's between the federal government and I think in the town of Orleans. I don't know if it's between the towns of Orleans and Eastham or Eastham and the Seashore. I don't know.
Yeah, clearly
Maybe
it
John
relates,
knows.
clearly it relates to the Seashore's claims of ownership on certain lands. That's what they're focused on. I don't think they care particularly if Eastham and Orleans are having a dispute, but they care whether the federal government has a claim to the lands that is unresolved. Yes, Kevin.
So again, you made the point, Leslie, that this is just for the temporary placement of the pipeline. I mean, this can be resolved with a simple one-page license during the short-term period. Done. I mean,
Well,
we would agree with you, Kevin. They were arguing that if there's a dispute over ownership of that land, that they might not be allowed to provide any authorization. Now, they were a little bit out over their skis as they talked about this topic. I sensed that this was not something they had really thought through. And I tried to indicate that I thought we could work through this issue. But we first need to figure out whether we're dealing with disputed land or not. And if we are, then we'll figure out how to deal with it. So we're waiting for a map, and we'll see whether the pipeline is going to cross any potentially disputed land. John, yes.
Yeah, most of the pipeline, won't that be in the waterway down the backside of the beach?
Correct.
yes.
So it's basically where we cross the bar in front of Nauset Heights.
Correct.
Pretty
It's a
much it.
pipeline to the, to the dredge disposal area.
That's right.
That's right. I mean, there might be a bit of land crossing right there between the Barrier Beach and Turn Island. There's really
Right,
not much
correct,
water in that area right now, so it's more land than it is water.
Correct.
So stay
Well,
tuned
it's
on this
tidal,
topic.
so that makes it high tide, it's underwater. So it's, that puts it in the flats consideration of, it's a leg to stand on anyway.
Charlie, can I weigh in?
Oh, please, John.
So as I recall, the disputed land is located in the town of Eastham. And it goes back to the question of whether the town of Orleans owned it because what was there through accretion no longer exists. When George Price was the superintendent, he took the position that the Seashore continues to own it. They never lost those rights. So as long as we're talking about crossing, where was the location of the pipe going to be? Is it going to be in Orleans?
Yes.
That shouldn't be a problem. I don't believe there's any disputed land in Orleans.
Well, so I'm glad you said that because I pulled up some maps that I had from 2017 that showed the areas that I thought were disputed, and they were all in Eastham.
Yeah, because we
Probably-
relied on a lot of the work Woods Hole Group did. We were not successful in arguing our point through a summary judgment proceeding. And so it hasn't gone forward. But at this point, I believe the only disputed land is in Eastham. So if the pipe is in Orleans, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, that's good news. So we'll work with them on that and try to get them to see that and understand that. And if we have to make some adjustments to the pipeline up in that area, then then, we'll try to work through that.
Yeah, now the seashore does own another piece of property down to the right of Callahan's Pass.
Yeah,
So again, I think you can work around what they own. They own some parcels in there. So, to the extent that you can make the adjustments, I think you can probably avoid their property.
yeah. I mean, we were hoping to be able to skirt those properties you're talking about, but if we can't, then we will have to get a special use permit from them. But so long as they own it and there's no dispute over it, there shouldn't be a problem with it.
Yeah, we had a very difficult time with them getting a license to do the new roadway connecting Hubler to the backside of Nauset Beach parking lot. They don't recognize licenses when it comes to construction projects, that they're short-term in duration. And so we had some difficulty getting them to even agree to let us do the work on the property we already owned because we crossed their property. So,
Yeah.
but I think if we can work it out at the local level and not get the regional people involved, because they're the ones that have to sign off on anything that is of a licensed nature for property. So to the extent that we can work with the superintendent and not go beyond that, that would be great.
Charlie,
Yes,
so, this is another one of those things that kind of like doing the red tide cyst study. This is something that can be done and should be done preemptively before we get too far down the process of permitting. It's simple. The National Seashore should have no problem providing the town of Orleans and the town of Eastham and this working group and anyone else a clear, simple map of the properties that they own. We should be able to walk into Seashore headquarters tomorrow and get that. And then once we have that map, then we can figure out where the pipe goes so that we stay away from seashore property or disputed property. And there's no reason why this thing should drag out more than 24 hours. As I said, there's no reason why we can't walk into Seashore headquarters tomorrow and get a copy of the map of the properties that they claim they own. That's it.
and we've asked them for their map as of that meeting that we had with them, or that phone call we had with them. We have not received it yet, but Leslie made a further request today to them, so we should have it shortly, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to see us get bogged down on something like this where, we spend time, money, and effort thinking about how many different ways we can lay pipe across the beach when you get the map and then you know where it is and where you can put the pipe, period.
I agree.
It's frustrating dealing with these guys. It always has been.
Okay. Leslie, you want to keep going on takeaways from that?
I'm pretty much done with takeaways from that. I can share my screen and I can show you what the map I do have that I think if people are interested, or we can move on if you want.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay.
With
right.
luck, we'll get a map from them and we can just send an email to this group indicating where the
Sure.
land is.
Yeah, so that's basically it from that meeting. So we
Great.
did request this morning that to withdraw that special review procedure request. So it should not be in the monitor tomorrow when it comes out.
Okay, so with that, I want to turn to what the implications are, and they're not tremendous with respect to the overall schedule and timeline that Leslie has developed for the permitting process. Leslie sent a revised timeline to me this afternoon. And Leslie, if you could bring that up on your screen and just highlight for people here what to expect in terms of changes, that would be great.
All right, can everybody see this?
Yep.
What is this? Go away. Okay. So I apologize if it's small. I think eventually we'll be porting this over into Microsoft Project timeline, so it's a little bit more professional looking, but this is what we have right now. You've seen this schedule before, and there's not really a lot that's changed since you saw it before. These tasks right here, I'm going to highlight these rows. This is what we're doing right now. So this is what I call task 11. That's the end of the existing contract we have with the town of Orleans to get you guys, attend these meetings and evaluate the special review procedure and establish the MOU. So, it's got filing the SRP request. We did that. We coordinated with MIPA. We've had these NESG meetings. This is the final one right here in this particular contract we have. What we had envisioned was at the end of this meeting that the NESG members would go back to the respective boards of selectmen and make a recommendation on whether or not to proceed with permitting of the project. And that then the boards of selectmen would make a vote. I think it says that in the MOU. So I don't know if that's happened. I feel like maybe there have been some votes, but I'm not entirely positive if those votes have been formal yet.
Well, I guess we should let Mark and Kevin speak for Orleans and Jackie for Eastham.
Well, I can jump in quickly on that, Mark, but the select board have voted to place, and John Kelly, I think we may have voted to recommend, but this will be coming up at our special town meeting on October 31st. So subject to town meeting vote, I believe our select board has voted to move this forward.
Yeah, we voted to place and recommend 5-0.
Thanks, Mark.
And what that means for anybody who's not familiar with the select board process is they're talking about funding for the further permitting of the Nauset Estuary project in fiscal year 21. So that funding will be obtained through town meeting and through a so-called debt exclusion vote later this year. But I think the select board is very much in favor of going ahead. Mark and Kevin, I don't know whether the select board has actually voted to adopt the so-called preferred alternative for the channel, which was contemplated, I think, in the MOU. Is that something that needs to be addressed?
Can I jump in there, Charlie?
Yeah.
So I think it's, we have a preferred channel route. If you're talking about preferred alternative in terms of the width, 50 versus 100, I think we need to do the assessment of that before. That's part of the alternatives analysis that we need to
Yep.
do.
I was not talking about the
Okay,
width. I was
sorry,
talking
okay.
about the general route, which I think was contemplated by the MOU.
Yeah, Charlie, we didn't get to that level of detail.
Is that something, Kevin, that could be put on the board agenda or should be put on the board agenda to be endorsed?
I would invite you to come in to present that ask and get it in the packet. John, if we look at our schedule for October 21st, is that kind of the next available?
Yeah, I can't, Leslie took over my screen, Kevin.
Sorry.
So I can't get to my agenda planner, but right now we have the two meetings in October, so
Yeah.
the 7th and the 21st.
So
So
Charlie,
we could work, maybe the 21st works better because maybe at that point you'll have a discussion and you'll have more information. So, I don't know that you need to make that decision now, Kevin. I think the board is fully participating in the study.
right.
So, I don't know that you need to dot every I as it comes up, but whenever the time is correct, we can certainly fit it in on the agenda.
There you go.
Yeah,
Charlie,
I'm not demanding it. I was only trying to follow what I thought was in the MOU, but
I'm not sure that the Board of Selectmen at this point would weigh in on a preferred channel. I think the Board of Selectmen is going to follow the advice of the Dredge Advisory Committee in the Nauset Estuary Working Group and the engineering firm. The Board of Selectmen isn't going to pick a channel. We're going to just take the advice given to us by the people we hire to do that job in the committees. And if that's what the recommendation is that's where we go. That's what the Board of Selectmen is going to go with. I don't think the Board of Selectmen is going to dispute which channel route we're going to go through. I'm not sure we need to go to that level.
I'm perfectly happy not going to that level. I was, again, only trying to follow what I thought was in the MOU, but we can leave it as it is and proceed based on the fact that the preferred route has been already embraced by this group. Jackie, do you feel you need anything on your end?
Well, I have not put it before the Board of Selectmen yet, so I'd like to do that at their second meeting in October, which would be the 19th. So heading into that, if there's anything specific we want to put before the board, we could, just let me know and I'll put that up. But I can put it on their agenda definitely for a discussion and a vote on the 19th.
Okay, I seem to recall from an earlier NESG meeting that you said that the board had already adopted the preferred alternative. Maybe my memory's failing me.
Oh, they told me that they agreed with that alternative, yes, and this committee voted on it. And then they also signed the updated MOU. So
Right.
at that meeting, they did both of those things.
Right, so I'm not sure what you would be asking them on the 19th.
I'm not sure. I'm just telling you, whatever you need moving forward with, we could do it on the 19th.
Yes, I feel like this committee should have at least a series or a set of recommendations for the select boards before we take anything to them. Just kind of going off of what Mark was saying is we shouldn't take each recommendation and bring it to the board. We should take at least a set, maybe the second MOU, and bring that to them with a recommendation for any other things that come up.
So maybe we should table that thought until we get to the second MOU discussion in this agenda and come back to that. Other related matters that relate to the whole issue of future funding. The Orleans Select Board did vote to place and recommend funding for the Mill Pond Channel study that will enable Orleans to determine whether a dredge channel into the Mill Pond from Priscilla Landing will make sense. And that work should get underway shortly. The goal is to get that study completed so that the permitting for that channel, if in fact it's recommended, can be occurring roughly simultaneous with the other permitting for the Nauset Estuary project. So stay tuned, if you will, for more work in that area. I think that is it there. Maybe we should turn next to this question of a second MOU before we come back to the issue of the September 1st NESG meeting and issues there.
Do you want me to finish going through the schedule?
Yes, that would be great, Leslie. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So again, it's, below this, below task 11, we get into tasks 13. Basically, that's the permitting. We're starting the joint review, task 13.1, 2, and 3. Nothing really changed, but I just wanted to remind everybody here that it is a long process. So we've got, most of the fall and early January to prepare this expanded ENF and draft DRI application. We'll have a few meetings with the NESG during that period to just update everyone on what we're pulling together and get you guys to read it. We'll have some coordination with the Seashore regarding some updating their website regarding the project, some public meetings. And then we'll coordinate with MIPA to respond to any questions that they have. We'll have a on-site meeting, virtual on-site meeting these days. And then finally, by April 15th, we should get the certificate from the secretary scoping the EIR. And also at that time, we would expect to get a comment letter from the Seashore saying whether or not we need to do an EA or an EIS. Then at that point, we move into 13.2. We need about 6 months. Likely, this is an estimate. We don't know exactly what's going to be in that EIR, but we need about 6 months as an estimate to prepare that EIR. We'll have some public meetings after it's been submitted. And then we would expect to get the certificate from MIPA in early February 2022. You see this line right here, file the NPS NOI. So if an EIS is required, then we have to file this notice of intent with the Park Service, letting everyone know that we're intending to prepare this EIR and file it. That's the document that sets the time clock for their review of this document. And if it's an EIS, they have a year from that notice to review and issue a decision on that EIS. If it's an EA, they have 6 months. So I tried to show those estimates out here. So a 6-month review would mean that we would get a decision from the Seashore towards the end of April 2022, and a year would, if we have to do an EIS, it's the end of August 2022. Once this task 13.3, once we get the certificate from the MIPA, we can go ahead and finalize that Cape Cod Commission review process. So that's what's shown here as task 13.3. I didn't even bother to put a timeline to the remaining permits. It all hinges on when we get this when the NEPA process is complete. But I would expect that to take about another, I'd say 6 months or so to file, 4 to 6 months to file those applications. So I just wanted to go through that, remind everybody it is a long, prolonged process on top of what we've already had to, what we've already had. So just wanted to remind everyone of that. And what I'd like to do with this is, provided it's okay with this group, to go ahead and I want to send it off to the Seashore and to the Cape Cod Commission and get them to weigh in on some of these timelines to make sure that we're giving them the time they need in order to review these documents.
I don't have any objection to sharing the schedule with them. I think it would be great to add, to what extent can you accelerate?
Yeah. Well, that's the point of the joint review. So we're going to try to, we're still going to do the joint review. One document's going to serve 3 needs. One meeting is going to serve 3 needs, but yeah, so that's the point of the joint review. All right, so that's
I have a
really it.
question.
Yeah.
So the public meetings 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, those are public meetings to present the public's comments to MIPA and these various agencies, not really for the town to present, these are the costs that we've come up with, updated costs. This is, the project timeline. This is the results of the red tide study. I'm just wondering if there's any, if there should be any space in here to kind of present the progress of this project to the public to get their feedback from the public to the town as opposed to the public to the agencies.
It's not a bad idea. I think that's a question for the group, maybe rather than me. A lot of that information that you talked about, Shana, will be in these presentations. We'll try to, break it down to sort of simple slides that describe all that information. And the comments that will be received, I mean, the town will certainly be able to see all those comments and review them. And we'll have to factor in responses to those comments into our document. So, but I think it might be a good idea to have some extra meetings for the public.
It's just a thought. I'm not sure. That's what I was thinking too. Maybe it could be combined. But I'm not sure, depending on when that happens, if it makes sense to have like a public update as to where the project is so far. But I mean, it is kind of going on. People can follow along as to what we're doing, but just like some sort of dedicated time for the public to see what's going on and offer whatever comments or questions they have.
Charlie, it's Kevin. I would strongly support that. I think any outreach we can do really does add to the ability of us to include that effort in our filings. I think the agencies like to see that. And I think we'd get better quality as opposed to just sticking to the minimum required. So Shana, I think that's an excellent idea. I just wouldn't want to jump too soon with that information until we're comfortable, having a fairly good package to present, but I definitely support it.
Mark, do you have thoughts from Orleans?
I think that's a good idea. I agree with Kevin and Shauna. This is a long process. Having those meetings is not going to lengthen it appreciably, if at all. So, it gives everybody an opportunity to weigh in on it, and it only makes the case stronger to go forward.
Would a good time for that be before the expanded ENF filing, after the expanded ENF filing? I don't have a particular point of view.
I think it would be after we prepare that expanded ENF, sort of right in here when we have these other meetings, and we could fit a few more meetings in there. Again, when we get comments from the public, well, this is from a regulatory standpoint, but when we get those comments from their public, MEPA is going to use those to help scope out what goes in that environmental impact report. And Cape Cod Commission will do the same for their DRI. So, we'll be required to address them, the comments from the public.
I can jump in, Charlie. Again, if not to bog it down or take away from the focus on the ENF, but sometimes it is good, Leslie, I've seen in projects years ago, that to have a pre-filing workshop for the public is nice to pop in the filing. To say, initial comments for the public have been considered. And, that outreach sometimes pays dividends. And, it might be, just literally a week before the filing, when you feel comfortable with the package, the contents, the exhibits.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I would probably lean on the NESG to sort of help set that up and, figure out when that's going to be and where it's going to be and how you're going to invite people. We can certainly give a presentation, but I think you guys would also be a part of it to describe, your thinking on the project and your support for the project.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense to have it before in case anything, just before it, in case, we invite shellfish fishermen, like, that channel is going right through a specific area. Can you move it, 10 feet to the side or something like that? So I think, presenting them with all of, maybe by that time we've decided on the width of the channel and we'll have the route to present and the timeline will be more refined, just to kind of present it, invite the shell fishermen, the aquaculturists, mooring permit holders, just anybody who's generally using the landings or storing their boats at the landings, and publicizing it, on the town website and that sort of thing. And then we can get, hopefully some pretty good feedback on, where we are with the project.
I like that.
Okay, so maybe we'll schedule one for Eastham and one for Orleans in that time period.
I think it would be helpful if we did it together. At least that's what I was envisioning. Because
Well,
a lot of the people using the same waterway, and they're working, and I mean, we can decide that later, but I was envisioning like a joint meeting. But
certainly
I agree
possible.
with that.
Certainly possible. So why don't we hold that decision for the moment, but resolve it when we're a little closer. Okay. So I think that takes us to a topic that I think we should address next, which is this so-called second MOU between Eastham and Orleans. I think originally Leslie was imagining using this SRP process and how it would all fit together in an MOU of a certain complexity and description might be appropriate. The more Leslie and I have talked, the more that I've had the sense that what we need for a second MOU is actually quite limited, and that is a document that expresses the consensus of the two towns to go forward now and proceed to seek permits for the project, that Orleans is going to be responsible for providing the funding for the permitting process at this stage, that the two towns will reach a decision on whether to go ahead with the dredging project and how it would be funded once the permitting process is complete. And that is really all that needs to be covered at this stage, but at least in my first cut thoughts. But I first want to find out whether the rest of you are generally in agreement with that. Not hearing a huge response. At least substantively, does that sound consistent with what this group's plans are, intentions are, understandings are?
I think it does.
Yeah, I agree. I think so.
Great.
All right, well, I'm imagining quite a short document. Is that,
Simple.
yeah, very simple, builds off the first MOU and just talks about this next phase. Leslie has indicated that she would like somebody other than Woods Hole Group to take responsibility for drafting this second MOU. So there is that question of how it gets drafted. And I don't know, John Kelly, whether this is something that town council needs to be engaged to do. I don't know what to do about this.
Well, I think, Charlie, we just need to put together a framework for what needs to be in it, and then we can get it drafted. I think it was more important when it was all part of the MIPA filing and that the process that we were going to go through before. But Leslie, the significance now is less. It's more of an MOU between the two towns.
Right.
So I think we can draft it, simply get the parameters together. And then Jackie and I can work on, what's agreeable, because obviously it's the two select boards. They're going to have to be in agreement with it. So why don't, if you, Charlie, if you have an outline, and I guess the question of the timing, we're already working under the first one. We initialed the changes to keep going. Is it really necessary to have a second MOU at this point?
I think that first MOU only took us through September 30th. And
Okay, so this would, maybe we should do one based on the fiscal year like we were doing the funding. Because I think at this point, it could be subject to annual renewal, but it's kind of hard to draft something that may be 3 years out. So if we take it in phases, that might be the best way to go.
all right, well, why don't I create an outline for you?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
You and Jackie and,
Yep.
and
Yep.
we'll go. from
And for the milestones, we would get Woods Hole Group to help us to make sure we have it sequenced properly.
Okay, I'll take
We
that.
can do that. Okay.
I'll take that under advisement and go from there. Thank you.
Charlie, I have a question. Will the group have the opportunity to review the MOU?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just
But I
talking
think
about,
ultimately it gets signed by the two select boards.
yeah. I'm just talking about something that we can put before this group to,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure whether it was going to go through the group before it went to the select board or whether it
Absolutely.
would go straight to them. Thank you.
okay. Okay, so why don't we turn back to the issues that came up in our meeting with the agencies on September 1st, because there was some interesting discussion in that meeting. And we should come back to that and see how we're going to deal with it. Leslie, do you want to pick that up?
Sure.
Excuse me, before you guys start, I just want to say thank you. I have to run to another meeting.
Hi, Shane.
Thanks, Shayna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shayna.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, basically, I'm just going off the minutes that you provided, Charlie, because I think that you and I talked and those really captured the main points that we heard from the agencies that day. They asked about dredge frequency. We did let them know that we thought we could have to come back and dredge behind the barrier beach as often as every year. But outside of that area, it was every 5 to 10 years. They seemed to nod their heads and accept that. Didn't have any problem with that. We certainly would be requesting that maintenance dredging in the permit applications. In terms of the channel width, what I think we heard was they heard that we haven't decided whether we're going to ask for 50 or 100 feet yet. We heard that if we ask for 50 now in the permits and then we want to go to 100 later, we're going to have additional review period. It's not just going to be a simple modification. We heard that. We also heard that in order to go with the bigger channel, we need to demonstrate the need. And we need to be able to demonstrate that we've followed the environmental impact assessment standards of avoid, minimize, and mitigate. So, we have to demonstrate that in order to make our case if we want to go with that 100-foot wide channel. So that's something that we'll have to work on in the expanded ENF and see if we can make that case that we've avoided, minimized, and or mitigated. And that will help guide us in picking the channel width as we move forward.
And I think what Leslie's referring to is that before we try to make a decision on the 50 versus the 100, Woods Hole Group needs to pull together all of its existing work and may have to do a little more work to sharpen the thoughts that they have about the implications of going 50 versus 100, and that they will share the results of their thinking on the 50 versus 100 question this fall. We don't have a date yet, but the the approach should be that we should set a date for having that discussion and trying to resolve this question, certainly before the ENF gets filed.
Another thing
Leslie-
we talked
Leslie,
about.
Leslie, we'll look to you to suggest a date when that might be.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do it now, but I think it'd be good to have a date that we're all shooting for.
Yeah, I'm thinking sort of early November. We're going to have to do some sort of engineering analyses using the model results to look at shoaling rates and things like that.
Okay.
So, another thing we talked about was the location of the channel behind the barrier beach. There may have been some confusion on that, so I did want to clarify. So we have the dredge zone that we're showing behind the barrier beach. And we're going to permit that, and that allows us to dredge in the deepest part of the channel, wherever it is at the time we're dredging, so that we minimize the dredge volume. What we were showing, have been showing, I'd say for the past year, for the channel layout, doesn't necessarily follow that deepest part. So we just, last 2 weeks, reoriented the channel again to follow the deepest part of the channel as it is right now, and recalculated the volumes. So they're lower than they were before. I can send that information to Charlie. I think it's going to be in that dredge feasibility report that the dredge advisory committee is getting. But just to be clear, the intent is to always dredge in the deepest part of the channel within the dredge zone, unless it gets within 300 feet of the back of the barrier, and then we've got to stay 300 feet off the back of the barrier. So that's our intent, and that's what the graphics will show, and the calculations will reflect that as well. We talked about the side cast dredging. I thought we got mixed comments on that. One thing I do know that we have to calculate, we have to determine impacts of that side cast dredging. So we'll have to do some assessment of, how far that material would be side cast, and what the volumes are and the thicknesses would be when they land in the channel, on the sides of the channel, and just what the impacts would be. So we'll have to quantify that. That will be a part of the alternatives analysis. What I am going to recommend is that when we do end up filing this permit, that we try to build in the flexibility to use different methods of dredging, whether it be side cast or the hydraulic, or in some parts of the estuary mechanical. And if we can make the case that, the impacts aren't significantly greater for one than the other, then that gives us the basis to allow that flexibility. And I think that you're going to want that, as you move forward with moving into construction. Let's see, we also heard about time of year restrictions. So we had been assuming we couldn't start before November 1. I think we heard that we might be able to start as early as October 1, but that because of winter flounder, we would need to stop dredging January 15th. And I guess the only other thing we really heard was that the existing conservation management plan that the town of Orleans has for Nauset Beach isn't something that we could modify if they determine we needed to for the dewatering area. We'd have to develop a whole new one for that particular aspect of the project if it's determined that we're causing a take. So again, that'll all be determined through the ENF and EIR process. But I think Amy from Natural Heritage was just letting us know what to expect in terms of the possible conservation management plan. That's really all I had for comments on that meeting.
Hey, Charlie, this is Kevin.
Yes, Kevin.
If Shana was here, she probably would raise this. So I'm thinking, where are you at, Leslie, in putting together kind of that dewatering cyst management plan? I don't think it needs to be a thick, tome of a document, but I think to show that we've got a plan that indicates how things are handled, how they're stored, containment, period of time, that would really be good to include.
Yeah, we haven't started it. It's something that we will do during preparation of this ENF. So, as a part of that document, we're not only pulling together everything we've done, but we're also generating new information, like the dewatering management plan, like a
Understood.
mitigation plan for shellfish. So there's a lot of new information that this group has not seen that we'll be developing over the next few months. Which is why we need to have sort of meetings every once in a while to bring you guys up to speed on what we're proposing.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I have a question, Charlie.
Shoot ahead.
On that Barrier Beach area that is particularly deep water that everybody's using right now, what happens if the channel being dredged gets to that point and the dredgers just decide we're not going to dredge through a sand flat that doesn't have anybody even going to use it once you're finished? Because the tendency is going to be going to the deep water along the beach that's been used for 10, 20 years. What happens in that case? Are you required to dredge a channel there? That's basically where I'm getting at.
No, you're not required. So if the towns decide at the time of dredging that they don't want to dredge that extra volume that goes through the shoal, or they don't think it's worth it, or they don't have time, they don't have to dredge it, they don't have to do it. They can skip that section of the channel.
Good.
Okay. Question, I guess, for Leslie. We talked earlier about inviting the agency representatives to future meetings of this group. And I'm on board with that. Are we talking about everybody who was invited to the September 1 meeting? Or are we talking about a subgroup of that? What are your thoughts, Leslie?
It would probably be everyone, and we could probably, we ought to craft an email that lets them know that they're invited and that we're going to be having regular meetings, and they're invited to help provide guidance on any decisions that are made, or to review the data that is being rolled out. So for example, any sort of new, sediment management plans or shellfish mitigation plans, things like that. But I would, it's hard to exclude some and invite others.
I'm not arguing against it. I just wanted to make sure I understood the scope, because it's going to make these meetings remotely quite much larger, as we experienced already. So we'll just have to figure that out as we go here. And so they would then start getting minutes of each of these meetings that we hold. And
I don't know about that. I don't know how that works. I mean, they're not technically members of your group, so I don't know if they need, I don't know how that works.
I would welcome any expert advice on this.
I would think that should they want the minutes, they would be available to them, but we don't need to overload them with paperwork that they may not need.
And it's all going to be on the town websites anyway.
Correct. Invite them, whether they choose to show up or not. If the people in the agencies feel that there's an issue maybe coming up, send them an invite with what's planned to be discussed. If they feel that it's pertinent to their review, then they can show up.
Right. In terms of the minutes, I believe that we established that the agency members are not official
That's right.
members of our group, and therefore I'd say they don't get the minutes. But as you point out, Charlie, they are available as a matter of public record. So if they want to get them, after they've been approved. They have that option.
That's fine with me. Okay. Great. So I think that takes us to the question of when we should meet again. And I don't have a particular date in mind, but Leslie mentioned that she would have more data to share in early November. And do we think we need a meeting before then? And if so, for what?
Well, we're going to be, what's scheduled for the MOU?
So we'll, the MOU will be available, I would assume, in a few weeks time, and we could have a meeting for discussion just of that. It would be a brief meeting. That's a good point, Harry.
Yeah, I would advocate that.
Okay, well, why don't I hold off on picking a date just yet until I can get some more input from John and Jackie about their reactions to the outline, how long it'll take to get it prepared as a document and all that, and then I'll circle back to everybody with a proposal for a date. Okay, anything else that folks want to discuss?
I'm off Cape today. How windy is it?
Very.
Very.
Okay.
Well, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Sorry, was that too quick?
I'll second John's second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.